Okay, hi everybody. Now we're into week 3, but before we get to week 3, I want to just review real quickly because we've only had discussions. Week 1, 2, and now week 3. It's just discussions. We'll have our first writing assignment next week, week 4. And I set the course up like this specifically because I want to get you thinking in terms of how I want you to actually think about the material. As I say, I don't want you to memorize lots of terms and multiple choice kinds of things like that. I want you to get into that higher thinking mode, if you will. Think back to week 1. We were looking at democracy. Right? The whole notion of, having a voice in the system, the pros and cons of majority rule in a democracy. And I think we see some of that with our current political, environment. Then, of course, the idea of kinds of politics, majoritarian politics, client politics, interest group politics, and the idea of the common good. And you see, with the majority, it's, the majority gets to rule, but are they ruling really in the best interest of the whole society, or is it a temporary majority? So we have to think about those things. Then in week 2, last week, I asked you to think about representation and liberty. And I asked the question, can you be free without a voice in society? And the vast majority of you said, well, of course not. You can't be free if you don't have a voice in the government. A government without a voice, that's tyranny, right? Okay, so then with both week 1 and week 2, we're looking at power. Right? Because that's what government is, the legitimate use of power and authority. So then it becomes, with week 1, who should control that power? The democracy, the people, the majority. And then week 2 becomes, how do we limit it with our representation? Okay? So that's really, we're not just thinking about, these abstract terms. We want to think about how we really can apply this stuff. What makes it relevant to us? Who should be in charge of the power? Okay? So this week now, we're dealing with federalism. And I want you to really focus on pages 55 to 66 in the book, and then page 76. Okay? So 55 to 66, and then page 76 in the book, please. Okay? And here's what I want you to think about federalism. Okay? All the time we think about checks and balances in the national government. All right? That's how to keep one branch from encroaching on the other branches or having too much power, right? How to keep them from being too powerful. But I want you to think about this, okay? Federalism, what we're talking about this week, federalism limits the national government, from an intrusion into local issues. Think of federalism like that. Now, the book will give you a definition of, separate powers or different powers, but I want you to think of federalism as a way to prevent the national government from intruding on local issues. Okay? Think of it like that as you go, because there's really 2 levels of government that exist. Okay? There's the national government, which handles issues that affect each and every one of us, all of us, we the people. But then there's the local government too, which are issues that are specific to your state. So we have 2 very distinct spheres. And the old notion of dual federalism, the federal government had these issues over here, and the state government had these issues over here, are how the country is kind of formed. Now it's evolved over time, there's no question, but you have to think about it. It's more than just a separation of powers. Think about why they separated it. Why did they assign certain powers to the national government and reserve the rest of the powers for state governments? Okay? And then you also want to think about, is it still relevant? Okay? So the question is, where do we now draw the line today? Who's in charge of what? Who should have the authority over these issues? Okay? Now, as we know, the Constitution protects all citizens. We're well aware of that. Okay? But the question with federalism is, what constitutes a constitutional issue? Not to overuse the word constitute, but you see, if you're going to say the national government is the Constitution, applies the Constitution, then you have to say, okay, but what are constitutional issues? Because some issues don't fit under the parameters of the Constitution. Hunting licenses, driver's licenses. There's a lot of things in our everyday life, and I would say far more issues in our life have no national constitutional relevance than do the constitutional issues, even though the constitutional issues get all the press. But when you think about your daily life, your speed limit, the emissions on your car, okay, the kind of water quality you have, all those sorts of things are state issues, local government issues that have far more impact on us than Washington. Okay? So federalism says, what should the states be in charge of? And that's important because we don't live in a one-size-fits-all society. It's hard to find one law that fits all 330 million Americans. Very, very hard to do. We have very unique things. People in Michigan, different from people in Florida, different people in California. But what are those uniqueness or those unique ideas? And then what are those unique ideas that are exempt from constitutional oversight? Think of it like this. The Ninth Amendment, if you look these up real quick in your book, the Ninth Amendment talks about any rights not mentioned in the Constitution belong to the people. The 10th Amendment says any powers not listed in the Constitution belong to the states. And the 14th Amendment says basically all laws have to be applied to people equally. Equal Protection Clause. Okay? The Due Process Clause. So think of it like this. Education. People can claim they have a right to an education under the Ninth Amendment. States can argue they have the power to regulate education under the 10th Amendment. And the national government can claim that they have to provide equal education to everybody under the 14th Amendment. See, this is where federalism gets kind of mixed up, all right? Because with the Ninth Amendment, right, it's our liberty to do what we want. But the 10th Amendment now is the government's power to limit us, and the 14th Amendment is the power to ensure it's fair. You see? So as you're thinking about federalism, think about what should be the purview of the state and what should be the purview of the national government. And then when it comes to the 14th Amendment, what constitutes equal protection under the law? All right, those are the kinds of things we want to think about in our discussion this week. 14th Amendment is very important when it comes to federalism. So read through the text. If you have any questions, never hesitate to contact me. I'll help you out however I can. All right? Okay, you guys have a good week, and I'll look forward to this week's discussion. Bye now.